Today we get to hear from Tamar Chute, who is a professor and the university archivist and head of archives at The Ohio State University. As head of archives since 2011, she manages the university archives, Bird Polar, and Climate Research Center archival program, and the Ohio Congressional Archives, which is a lot of John Glenn's stuff and other things. She regularly gives presentations on all aspects of university history, including the university's founding, student traditions and activities, buildings on campuses, OSU then and now. Are you hearing the invitation to have her come back and do something else? Because I've heard her give this presentation today, and it's awesome. Tamar oversees and implements outreach and engagement for the university archives, both on and off campus, and administers the university's records management program. She's had leadership positions in the libraries and on campus-wide committees. For the Society of American Archivists, she chaired the largest section in the association, which was the College and University Archives section, and currently she chairs the Big Ten Academic Alliance's University Archivist Group. I really want to go to one of your conventions or trade shows. That would be really okay. Oh, really? Nice. Well, let's welcome Tamar Chute to Columbus Rotary.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you, Mike, for inviting me today. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, so normally when I give presentations, I wander. So hopefully I won't wander too much because I like to see what's going on, see if you have questions. So I know we've got built-in time for Q&A, but if there's something on the screen that doesn't make sense to you, just shout it out. I mean, there's not that many of us. We can do this, right? So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about Ohio Stadium at 100. Of course, last fall we celebrated the stadium's centennial. And at the end, I'm going to ask you guys a question of why we celebrate. Why do we celebrate milestone events? We know there are several coming up, both in Columbus and at different points of various companies and whatnot. So why do we do it? So you guys can think about that as we talk about the stadium. So here's a construction So the first place on campus that Ohio State played was called Ohio Field. Now, does anybody know where Ohio Field was? High Street where?
In front of education or social work somewhere up there.
Exactly. So it was the corner of Woodruff and High Street. And it's where, if you know anything about campus, it's where the ARP's parking garage is now. The landscapers kind of pretended to make a homage to it. I mean, it's okay. It doesn't look like a football stadium to me, but it's fine. But this is what Ohio Field looked like when it was first christened in 1908. We did have a football team back in the 1890s, but they did not play at Ohio Field. Then they did migrate to Ohio Field, but it wasn't officially named really anything. But until Ohio Field was christened by our president's wife in 1908. It was fine for the size that we had, but, not huge. Now, it happened in the late 1910s as we had a football star in Columbus, Chick Harley, come to Ohio State. So he was actually a high school football star in one of the Columbus public schools, and he brought his fan base, who had never really gone to Ohio State University football games before. And the problem was we went from having less than 10,000 to having more than 10,000, and the stadium only sat 10,000. So you can see here what happened. So the tree, right? This is how you watch a football game, is you climb a tree. Nowadays, there'd probably be kids in hammocks. I don't know how often you've been on campus, but hammocking is like the thing to do. Makes me nervous. But I don't know, maybe hammocks would be better than standing in the tree to watch a football game. Not sure. But the point is, not enough space, right? So what are we going to do? Well, so these three men came up with this idea that we should build a new stadium. And in their mind, if we're going to do it, we're going to go big, right? It's sort of the Ohio State way now, but at the time it wasn't. People thought they were crazy. They thought it would never be filled. Why could we possibly fill the stadium of 62,000? But they said, let's try it. Let's see what happens. So in order to get the ball rolling, they asked Howard Dwight Smith, one of the university architects, to come up with a design for the stadium. And you can see what his original drawing kind of looked like. It is on the National Registry of Historic Places because it was the first double-deck concrete stadium in the country. The reason that it was open was because we had a track team. And in a way, no offense to the football team, the track team was actually more significant at the time than the football team, the track team was. So they had to have a straightaway to be long enough for the track team. So they couldn't close the end because they had to be able to run. So until the most recent renovation in 2001, the south stands that we know today were taken down or modified every year to allow the track team to run straight. The other thing is that he knew that he wanted to have as much visibility as possible for people to feel as close to the action on the field, which is why you get that horseshoe shaped as well. The university did not go to the state to raise the money, but they created what they called the Stadium Campaign. This was our first big fundraising campaign. I don't know how many of you are alums, but I'm sure you get asked probably twice a year for money. Or I always tell when I talk to seniors and I say, have you guys gotten asked yet? And they say no. I said, well, graduation's a week from now. You'll be asked the day after. So that's what we do, right? But at the time, we weren't going to go to the state legislature for funds, and so we had to raise $1 million. And $1 million in 1920, $1 million today is a lot of money. $1 million in 1920 is a lot of money. So what did they do? So they actually pulled together a group of Ohio businessmen and created the Stadium Campaign Board. They came up with ideas of how to raise money. They had to convince people that didn't care about football to give money to the university to build a football stadium. And if you look at a lot of the literature, it doesn't say football at all. They talk about how important it is for the state of Ohio, how it's going to be a magnet to draw people to Columbus and to the state. They talk about physical fitness. There was this sense after World War I that we didn't have enough physical fitness in the youth of America. So they built on that sort of mentality as well. So the campaign to build, you can see there was a parade downtown that was put together. All students of the university, men and women, participated, and they did calisthenics and all sorts of things down High Street. Uh-oh, it's not changing. There we go. Whoops. So that's a little bit of a close-up. So it wasn't just the football, and it wasn't just the athletes. It was all the students participating. The building on the left there that you see, that is the Armory, and it was where the Wexner Center for the Arts is now. They actually had, if you think about it now, when we have a fundraising campaign, you see like the thermometer, right? And you fill it, and it's filled in. That was what that placard on top of the building was. Every county in the state had sort of a goal. And every class of the university, the current students, also had a fundraising goal. And so if you managed to hit that goal, your square got filled in. I like the float on the right there because it says, if you can't see it, it says, Columbus discovered America. The stadium will help America discover Columbus. Okay, so while the group of businessmen were trying to figure out how to raise the money, they also employed the rest of the university architect staff and students in the design. So you can see here a group of students and some of the staff working on a model of the stadium, a small model to actually see how is this going to work. So it's one thing to have it, on paper, but to build a 3D model to actually get the work going, what's going on here. And construction ended up beginning in 1921. So not bad, right? We kick off in 1920. We start to build in 1921. We did have a railroad spur that went to the stadium because of the amount of concrete, gravel, steel, sort of all the supplies that had to be brought to the stadium. So they built a temporary railroad spur to get the supplies there. There you can see. In the middle there, I think that's the picture of them actually starting to paint the numbers on the seats. You know, that's how we get more seats, as we start shrinking the size of the seat. Yeah. That's an aerial that I really like, just because it shows you the steel of the stadium, but also what's around it. We had this picture in the stadium exhibit, and someone asked about the buildings right to the left, and had to look at the university map at the time. And a lot of those are agriculture buildings. I like this picture. So this is almost done, right? So it's almost completed. And you can see the straightaway, right? So you can see what, when we talk about it being open, that's what it looked like. And like I said, it was a little bit over 62,000 were the prescribed seats originally. We did have 2 football games that we won against Ohio Wesleyan and Oberlin before the official opening.
Tell them who won.
Well, those 2 we won. Ohio State won both those.
But there were others.
There were others, yes. We're getting there. That is the football team coming out right before one of the games. You can see that the construction is not quite done. If you look at the top right. So the tower at that point wasn't done, but they got to play on the field, right? So they got to work. Yeah.
Who are the contractors on that?
I do. I don't have it off the top of my head. But after this, I can go, my slide's actually in the notes, it says. So I will look at that. So the day before the dedication game, the stadium was done. There was actually 72,000 people that wanted to come. So for the dedication game, we had to find a place to put 10,000 extra spectators. So they built, for the first time, they built the temporary south stands. The stadium was kind of construction dirty, right? We know how that is. And so President Thompson, the Board of Trustees, and members of the faculty actually took brooms and cleaned the stadium. And you can see them there. This I would love to see sometime. Now, dedication game was October 21st, 1922 against the University of Michigan. That's a copy of the program there. And you can see on the right, that picture, you can see those temporary stands that I talked about. It was quite an event. The governors from both states came, a lot of dignitaries came. Obviously, the stadium was packed. Unfortunately, we lost the football game. We just moved along, But you can see there was a 21-gun salute. There was the marching band, everything that you would envision in a stadium today. And that picture is a panorama. It doesn't show as well as the original scanned, but it does give you a sense of kind of the majesty of what was going on that day. So I talked about majesty. So, of course, the stadium, that was one day, right? But it's been 100 years, and a lot more has gone on in the stadium. So I have a couple pictures, of course, the marching band. The marching band started performing at football games earlier, actually in Ohio Field. And so they brought a lot of their same formations and procedures when they started, when Ohio Stadium opened in 1922. We also had what we call the male cheer squad. So if you didn't know, cheerleaders originally were men. It was set up by the Student Senate. They decided for the opening that there would be 6 cheerleaders. And so you can see some of them there. We do have a copy of the sweater that this gentleman is wearing. I don't know how they actually perform stunts in suits, but I mean, they made it work. So, but we have some where they're literally flying over each other, and I think, wow. I mean, first of all, the cleaning, but beyond that, it's just impressive that they managed to do what they could in the outfits they had. And of course, we've got a lot of traditions that continue today. So on the left, there is the Victory Bell. That was put in the, I should have this off the top of my head. It was the 1950s, and that is still rung after every Ohio State win. I should make sure I said that. And then on the right, it's, again, I don't know how well you can see it, but the gentlemen there are part of Bucket and Dipper, which is our junior, at the time was a junior male honorary on campus. And there is a tradition with the University of Illinois where whoever wins gets a wooden turtle. It's called the Illabuck, so Illa for Illinois, Buck for Buckeyes. And the Illabuck goes to the university that wins that game. We have more than they do. And each game is written on it. So there's many of them at the archives. We have Illabuck number 4. I don't know how many there are floating around. But once it's filled, the university who won the last one on that turtle gets to keep it. Somebody asked me one time, why a turtle? I have no idea. It's students' honorary, I don't know. They wanted a turtle. I got nothing for you.
Wasn't it originally a live turtle?
It was for 2 years, and then it died. Yeah. I think they thought, wait a minute, this is not going to work out. How about a wooden one instead? Which I'm thankful for because I don't have to have a turtle at the archives. I just have a wooden turtle. And of course, Brutus. So if you don't know, that's what Brutus looked like originally. Brutus was born, I guess I would say, designed, created in 1965. A very large nut. His eyebrows could move and his smiley face could turn upside down when he was sad. Over time, though, he's obviously changed into the Brutus we know today. One of the things that we wanted to do when we talked about the anniversary of Ohio Stadium was to point out that it really was more than football. So I mentioned that during the campaign, they very rarely talked about football, right? Because how do you get someone who's not interested in sports to donate? And so I wanted to show that the stadium has always had more than football in it. This right here is what became known as the stadium dorms. And you can see underneath the stands during the Great Depression, they built barrack-type housing for students. Students had to cook and clean. As part of that, they got reduced tuition, or reduced room and board, sorry, not reduced tuition, reduced room and board for living in the stadium. And it really was, they got a bunk and they got a footlocker, and that's what it was. We have some incredible letters from particularly mothers who were sent to President Reitmeyer at the time, thanking the university for providing this type of housing subsidy for their children. One in particular, she said, my son would not be able to stay in school if it hadn't been for this program. So this idea of affordable housing, which we talk about a lot at the university today, access and affordability is actually already done in the 1930s for during the Great Depression. The stadium dorms actually change over time. Eventually women are included, and the dorms switched to more regular rooms than they were at the original. When the stadium was renovated in 2001, they got rid of the dorms as part of that renovation. We've also had a lot of different sports. So I talked about track and field. We've had field hockey and soccer and lacrosse. Also, we used to have a theater underneath the stands. This was a temporary theater. It was put up. They did some Broadway shows, and they took it down for the football season. So after a time, that gets a bit much, right? So similar to the South Stands up and down, they finally said, okay, we're done. So in the 1960s, they ended the stadium theater. We've also had concerts. So one of the benefits of not having real grass is you can have concerts at the stadium. So the picture on the right is the first stadium we had in Ohio, the first concert we had in Ohio Stadium, which was the Pink Floyd concert. And one of the things I think that's incredible about the stadium is that you could never go to a football game, and if you graduate in spring semester, you graduate from the stadium. And there's something about that and about the location of the stadium that I think is very unique about Ohio State. You can graduate from the stadium in a lot of universities, but the fact that you get to walk across the field, get your diploma, really means something to a lot of people. And so that's the piece that I think brings back that idea of the original mission, that it was not just for football, even though that's primarily what we use it for, that there's all these other things that happen in the stadium. So why celebrate? I told you, this is the me turning the questions back on you. Why do we care, right? I mean, besides the fact that it helps me have a job, why do we care about celebrations? I don't know how many of you have an anniversary coming up or something like that, or maybe you just did. Why? Why do we do this?
Well, the stadium succeeded as the students said it would. It focused attention on Columbus for decades that we
Right.
would never have had.
Yes. So I think I'm supposed to repeat this, right? For the folks at home. Yes, okay. So the answer is that the stadium succeeded, right? That it did bring people to Columbus. It's brought recognition, etc. So I think that that is a piece of why to celebrate. That we can look back and see what the original intent was and how it's manifested over time. What else? Yeah.
I don't know if this is right or not, but we have the right in this country that we've taken for granted, the right to assemble peaceably in large groups. And stadiums provided a way for people of similar interests to assemble in large groups, and that's a good thing. Was that it or not? I don't know. That's my interpretation these many years later.
So I'm going to try to paraphrase. Let's see. So, again, for the people at home, the idea being a gathering place for people to assemble, share a common interest, and express themselves. Yeah. Yes.
I know, I'm from Chillicothe, Ohio, and I can tell you that the Ohio Stadium, being a former professional athlete, my top 5 athletic events I ever had are at Ohio Stadium. I won 4 state championships in track and field right there at that stadium. And then the most incredible was, and I'll sit down real quickly after this, I went to Stanford and we came back to play Ohio State in 1982 and beat the Buckeyes.
You're welcome now.
Some family members in the stands, and you know, for a kid from Chillicothe to have that happen at Ohio State was incredible. So I thank Howard Smith for what he did, bringing some excitement to my life.
That's awesome. Okay, for the people at home, I'm not even going to paraphrase that. Ask, next time you're in, ask the question. There we go.
Perhaps it's a way to have a fundraiser around an anniversary celebration.
So I think that is why people tend to look at anniversaries. Yes, right? There is an element of fundraising as an aspect of that. I think it's a combination, right? I think it's there's a reason that archives and celebrations exist. So I put a few things here that talk about what, just as an example of the types of things the University Archives has. So the way that my short elevator speech is that the University Archives holds the university's memory. And if you don't remember what happened before, then why are you here, right? How did you get to this place? What was the conflict? What was the struggle? What was the way that we got to this place? And that's part of what an archives can do. We're not perfect. We tend to document more the upper administration than we do elsewhere, other areas of the university, which is true in every archives, but we're trying. And so this is just a few things, just to give you an example. And so what's in an archives? And I don't know if you all have your own archives. I don't know if Rotary has an archives. I don't know, you do have an archives, fantastic. But what are the things that are in an archive? So here's a couple. So the picture on the left is our stack. So they're 30 feet tall, 175 feet long. We do tours. You can talk to me later if you are interested. But we have a lot of different material from all sorts of things. And we take electronic material too. It's not just paper. A lot of people think, oh, it's all dusty paper. It's not. I mean, we have that as well. But we take electronic copies and different things. So we have scrapbooks, so we have artifacts. The picture on the right is probably our most valuable item. That is our first registrar's book. So I can't go sell that on eBay. It's not a financially valuable piece of artifact or record. But in my mind, if you don't have students, then you don't have a university. And if you don't have a university, we're probably not necessarily meeting today here, right? We might be meeting somewhere else. Columbus would still be a fantastic city, but it would be a very different city if Ohio State University didn't exist. And so without that record of those first students when they walked through the door in 1873. That's, to me, that's why that's the most valuable thing at the archives. Now, who uses an archives? This is where I'm turning it back on you all. Who uses an archives?
Journalists.
Journalists, yep.
I'm gonna go with everybody. I mean, really. I'm sure you see people from all walks of life that come in and want to know about information that you might be the only people that have access to be able to scroll down through all that and find things. I mean, it's spectacular, and you're 100% right. Without knowing our history, we're lost. So, yeah, no, it's true.
So everybody, sorry.
You can pay her later.
I'll pay her later. Yeah. So the question is basically everybody. So the people I'll throw out there that you may not think of, at least at Ohio State, yes, journalists, 100%. Genealogists, probably 60% of our requests are people who have relatives who attended or taught at Ohio State or worked at Ohio State. What do you have on my great-grandfather, right? My great-aunt went to Ohio State. What do you have on her? So we get a lot of that. We get, I'm trying to think of, so students, researchers, people writing a couple-page paper all the way to dissertation. The media, for not only journalists, but if you've watched an ESPN show and you've seen pictures of, the Snow Bowl, for example, guess where they got that from. And then we also have lawyers who come in and look up information as well. So I like to throw that out there. You never know. So it's a wide range of people. Also people decorating. How many of you have been to a restaurant and seen a picture of Ohio Stadium? Or anywhere on campus, right? They came to us for a copy. So that is a little bit both about Ohio Stadium and the archives. And I will open it to question. Am I good on time? Am I good on time? Yes? Okay, great. Yes.
I saw a webinar advertised online for had to do with archivists and something else for business. Do you recommend that?
So the question is, he had seen a webinar about archivists in business. I will say that the best-known business archivist here in Columbus is Steve Hausfeld, who's the nationwide insurance archivist. He's fantastic, and they do have a business archives. There's an archive section for business archivists that do a lot of different things. Thinking about how they can help in promotion and in legacy. So, yeah. Steve doesn't know it, but I just threw his name out there. I'll tell him later. So, yeah.
Departing OSU presidents have to turn over their records to the archives?
Yes. Departing OSU, anybody has to turn over their records to the university archives. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I've heard that the size of Ohio Stadium, the seating capacity, was kind of a mystery at its origin. Can you talk about that at all? Did people know what they were getting?
So the question is the size. Was it a mystery? They didn't. They sort of downplayed it. So I think the people that designed the stadium, right, President Thompson, certainly Howard Dwight Smith, Thomas French, they knew that it was going to be 62,000. But there was a lot of concern over the filling of the stadium and this idea that we're going to spend a lot of money for an empty building. And so it wasn't out there, right? Like now, if you're going to build a brand new stadium, you're going to seat 50,000 people. You know, it's sort of this big thing. It was sort of a little bit on the down low. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the site of the stadium was in the floodplain. Was the dike? Were they there? They had to build the dikes to keep the water out.
Yes. So the question is about the floodplain of the stadium. Yes, they moved the river for the stadium by building up the banks and things like that. During the more recent renovation, they also installed some like a flood wall underneath and also some pumps. I think there's 4 to 6 pumps underneath the stadium. So there is there's definitely a concern about the river in the stadium. I don't think anymore, but at the time, and it did. The river doesn't always go the way you want it to go. It's a river. So we do have images of periodically the stadium, not underwater, it's too tall for that, but flooded. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
What's the history of the?
Oh, yes. Okay. So the history of the Ohio State University. So in 1870, we were established as the Ohio Agricultural and Mechanical College. In 1878, the state legislature changed our name to the Ohio State University. In the legislation, they capitalized the. That being said, it depends on the era of the university's history as to how much we emphasize it. It's usually related to how much do we want people to know that we are the university in the state of Ohio. So there's been times where the logo is like just an OSU sort of in a script. There's times where it's not capitalized, but more recently, it's sort of an emphasis. And then if you watch, pro football, that sort of got into the whole lexicon of people saying the Ohio State University. So, yeah. I'm
sorry, I got to ask a similar question. It's not related to the lawsuit from OU then?
It is not related to the lawsuit from OU. No.
OSU's lawsuit against OU. Okay, just checking.
It is not.
It's related to computers, because the story from Ed Jennings, when he was doing it, the president, was that people were starting to get their internet names. And we were early, so we are osu.edu, which left Oklahoma State and Oregon State trying to find something. And it was important because all of a sudden people knew those kinds of names. And to be sure that we were the OSU, we started to emphasize it. And it was funny, so people remembered it.
There is always the confusion between Oregon State, Oklahoma State. Yes. Periodically, we have gotten messages, I'm looking for my grandfather, and then you read through and you're like, wrong OSU. Yeah.
A pretty specific question. So I graduated 10 years ago, and I remember in Thompson Library, before your exams, your midterms, you would rub the head. I don't really remember where I learned that. I just did it. It was ingrained. I don't know.
Yep.
How do you, well, first of all, do you know the history of why that is what students do? And two, how do you maintain that thing? Because every time you walk in, it's just hundreds of students touching his head.
So President Thompson, the Boston president, William Oxley Thompson, is back. Actually, it was taken out for COVID for a couple of years, and now it's back. It was put back, I want to say, in the last fall. So he's back. Why exactly people started doing that, we don't know. Like all good traditions, when it starts, people don't think, we should really document this so that, 20 years from now, the archivist can help the incoming president know why this happens. This happened when President Drake came. We got a call from Academic Affairs, and they said, wait, we're going to take him over, and we're going to show him to do it, but why? I'm like, I don't know why. Anyway, we could not find it. We found when it was moved to that location, but not why we started it. So we don't know why. Just similar to if you see people that do this, we don't know when that started either. It just starts and then it becomes a tradition, right? But yes, I think it's actually something they talk about during orientation now. And so I think the students just know, but I'm glad he's back. It was, when we weren't sure how COVID was spread, the idea of, 10,000 students rubbing his head was maybe not the best idea. So, yeah, but he's back. Other questions? Yeah.
Can you speak to the origin of Mirror Lake?
Sure. Yeah, so Mirror Lake actually started as a series of bogs and a small, so it was originally a spring, a natural spring. The water was considered good for you. This is also where if I'm talking to undergrads, I say don't drink the water in Mirror Lake anymore. But there were public dippers. We have pictures of people that would come in a group in the 1870s and take the healthful water of Mirror Lake. over time, as the university grew and the construction and whatnot, the natural spring dried up. There was a lot of questions about what to do with the space where Mirror Lake is now. Originally, campus, the intention was that University Hall would be the farthest north, and campus would go south, basically down Neal Avenue. That never really happened because the original president's house was the farmhouse, which was closer to High Street. So campus naturally went to the east instead of going south. But the idea at one point was for them to put a road through Mirror Lake, actually. Didn't happen because there was a New York philanthropist who found out that we were looking for funds to build an observatory. And he was talking to one of our faculty members in New York, said, I hear you want to build an observatory. And of course, the university, as a good people, said, yes, if you'd like to give us money for an observatory, we'd love to have one. So they built one somewhat similar to where the faculty club is now, if you've been on campus. And he said, that's great, but if you're going to put this building here, you got to make it that area, you got to clean it up. And so they kind of dug it out and created, if you look at older pictures of Mirror Lake with the most recent renovation, it looks very similar to what it did at that point. There were islands in the middle for a while and bridges that students could go over. Those over time, there was a big storm, a lot of the trees fell down, they took those islands out. And so it's changed over time, but that's kind of how we didn't build a road, obviously, through Mirror Lake, and that's really because of the observatory, after all. So, yeah. Oh, we're at time. Okay. Well, thank you all for inviting me again. I do have two things if you'd like. This is a postcard of the first football team. So there's some up here. You're welcome to take them. And then this is just something fun we did for the students during their reading day last week. So it's the day between the last day of classes and finals. It's got some fun OSU trivia and a QR code that you can link to it, and also just how to get information about the archives or, find information about your great-grandfather who went to Ohio State. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.